Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
A Time for True Show is sponsored by the office of Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, a periodontal, dental implant and laser specialist in New York City, for over 40 years. Dr. Fialkoff was honored by the International College of Dentists and Pierre Fauchard, and received the Presidential Lifetime Humanitarian Honor from the White House. Call us at 718-229-3838.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard, you don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart, yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome to A Time for True Show. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, and it's a pleasure to have you back with us again, especially getting close to our Independence Day. Very special holiday, great time of the year. I know a lot of you are getting ready for your vacations. And tonight we have something that's going to help you enjoy those vacations, how to keep you out of pain with all the stress that we suffer from in today's world. Unfortunately, sometimes we end up having stress and the muscles hurt in our mouths. We wake up sore. And today we have a very special guest who's going to help us with that and give us some ideas of what we can do, what he has done. And I know you're going to find this show very informative. So Buddha, if you can, let's put up the pictures of our special guest today up on the screen for our viewers. And I want to introduce Dr. Monroe Elkin, DMD. There you see him. He has a Bachelor of Science in Pharmacy and actually practiced as a pharmacist. I went on to dental school. He's a dental device inventor and an expert in sales and marketing. He was the founder and dentist of Delta Dental of Kentucky, which secured FDA clearance for hard occlusal night guard and snore reduction appliances. There you see him with Muhammad Ali. As director of sales at Bite Tech Incorporated, his night guard appliance was awarded the American Dental Association Seal of Approval. Now is distributed through 1,800 Target stores, Dick's Sporting Goods, Sears, hundreds of high schools, organizations, and colleges, including Notre Dame, Iowa State University, Clemson University, University of South Carolina. Dr. Elkin ran a dental private practice in East Brunswick, New Jersey for about 30 years, specializing in the treatment of oral injuries for athletes, performing general and traumatic dentistry for athletes at Wagner College, and subsequently was a marketing consultant in the dental field. He hosts a show, Dental Corner Zoom, and this show interviews dentists, athletic trainers, directors. He holds patents in the U.S. for a customizable liner, for helmets, for shoulders to protect our athletes. And he holds patents in Canada, U.S., New Zealand, Europe for the custom-fitted athletic mount guard and bruxism appliance, that's clenching and grinding. Dr. Elkin was a member of the Florida Concussion Task Force, a legislative committee member of the Academy of Sports Dentistry, a board member and president of International Medalist Association, executive director, President's Council on Sports and Physical Fitness, and he's awarded the Newark Do Something Brick City Award for community leadership. And he's authored articles on increased athletic performance using mouth guards, true or false, and new development in saving avulsed teeth, And Buddha, if you will, let's bring up Dr. Elkin onto our screen and bid him a warm welcome to A Time for Truth show. Welcome, Doc.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I was teasing you before, but I was wondering what you haven't done in your life.
I could say the same about you.
Well, thank you very much. Well, you know what? Let me ask you, because you have so much to cover. How did you decide? Because you're a pharmacist, you're a dentist. So tell the viewers a little bit how you decided to go into these careers.
Well, I got interested in pharmacy when I was young, and I was outside of a pharmacy in the neighborhood with friends, and the pharmacist came out and said, "Hey, does somebody want to do deliveries?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll do them." And I started doing deliveries, and then I started doing stock in the store for him, and I got very interested in it. And when I graduated from high school, I played baseball in high school, and I was accepted to Columbia, Brooklyn College of Pharmacy, and Philadelphia College of Pharmacy. And I picked Brooklyn College because it was connected to Long Island University, which at that time had a really great baseball program. And I kind of thought, well, I'd go to pharmacy and then play ball and see what happens after that. But when I told the people at pharmacy that I had to be out of the school by 1 o'clock to get to practice, they said, "No, you're here till 5." So it was, okay, do I stay there or do I leave and go liberal arts? And I decided to stay, with the reality of, how hard it is to actually make it, in the major leagues. So, I graduated pharmacy, and I worked as a chief pharmacist for a store in Manhattan on Varick Street for about 2.5 years. Had a friend of mine who lived on my block who worked for Eli Lilly, and he convinced me to apply for a job with Eli Lilly. And I did that. I worked for Lilly, for almost 9 years. And I became friendly with a lot of dentists on the territory. I used to call on dentists, OBGYN, pediatricians, hospitals. And at one point I said, gee, I want to be my own boss. And I applied to dental school. It was University of Medicine and Dentistry in New Jersey, which had a 3-year program instead of 4. And I figured, since I have a house and 3 kids to support, 4 years was going to be a real, tough thing to do. So I got into dental school, and while I was in dental school, I worked 30 hours a week in a pharmacy to support the family. And I remember I had a bank account that had $5.76 in it, and it was like that for 3 years. So anyway, I got out of dental school, and as I mentioned before, my first job, I went to work for a Cuban dentist who had 2 offices in West New York, New Jersey, and I ran one of his offices for him. And then about 3 years later, I bought my first practice. And about 2 years after that, I bought a second practice and moved everything. Practiced dentistry for close to 30 years. And it was enjoyable. Practice evolved into full mouth rehabilitation, but I got interested in sports dentistry. My son was a football coach at Wagner College. That's how I got the job as dentist for the college. And he asked me to make mouth guards. And I went in the spring one day and took 100 impressions. That was in 1985. And
Wow.
as I was doing it, I said, this is absolutely insane, because we had to make those mouth guards for the afternoon for practice. And my thought was, if I could find a material like a boil and bite that would shrink sufficiently in the mouth while it's cooling to give me a custom fit, then I wouldn't have to take impressions. Got together with a polymer chemist at Princeton University. Couldn't get him enthused about the project. And hindsight, back then, there probably wasn't a material that could do what I wanted it to do. So, believe it or not, 18 years later, I had a patient in the office who was a physicist, a professor at Rutgers.
My God.
And for whatever reason, out of the clear blue, I said to him, Jerry, you know a polymer chemist that I can talk to? And he introduced me to Dr. Rabioni, who we have become friends, partners. I met with him. I brought him Proform material and told him what my idea was. And he said, oh, this is easy. And I said, wait a minute, Benes. There hasn't been a change in mouthguards since 1964. We're now in 2004.
Uh-huh.
And about an hour later, he sent me an email with a patent. And I looked at the patent and I called him and I said, look, I'm not really interested in the guy who's got the patent. I'm not interested in the material that he's using. I said, I'm more interested in the company that makes the material. And the company was ExxonMobil Chemical. And he said, why? And I said, well, my friend Alan is president of ExxonMobil Chemical's marketing and advertising division. So I called my friend, told him what my idea was. And the next thing I knew, I'm getting phone calls from people in ExxonMobil. We want to work with you on this project. They gave me a 5-year non-disclosure. Funny thing was, which we didn't know at the time, but Menace, my partner, and the chief research chemist for Exxon had taught together at UCLA, and they knew each other.
Right.
And so I called him. He had a long Indian name, so they used to call him Watson instead. And I called him, and I said, look, Menace would like to get about 5 pounds of material. He wants to work with it and see what the properties are and, you know, if it'll do what we want it to do.
Right.
I come home one day. On my front porch are 2 drums with 80 pounds of material. Now, 80 pounds of material could make probably 3,000, 3,500 mouth guards. And now my problem was, how do I get it to his house? So my wife and I were loading Ziploc bags because the stuff is pellets, the plastic. So ultimately, I got it over to him. We formed a company, he and I. He made the first 3,000 mouth guards by hand. And if you saw them, they looked like they came out of an injection mold. He actually had to buy his wife a new oven because he had to melt the pellets, and I don't know what happened, but he destroyed the oven. So what happened was I was up at my cousin's house one day, and I had some of these mouth guards, and I showed it to him, and I had him try it. And I said, are you interested in maybe coming into the company? And the reason I asked him was his background was mergers, acquisitions, leverage buyouts. And he said, yeah, definitely. And so the 3 of us put money into the company. My thought process was that if we made some inroads, we didn't have $20 million to really launch the thing in a big way. So somebody might try to buy us. And that was not my expertise. That was my cousin's expertise. He was buying and selling companies every day. We filed for a patent in 2004 on the Game On. Well, at that time it was called Custom Bite, and it literally took longer than it should have. It took 7 years to get the patent. Literally, the day that we got the patent, somebody showed up at my cousin's door and said they wanted to talk to me. And my cousin's wife said, well, he doesn't live here. He lives in Florida. So he said, get him on the phone. And I spoke to this gentleman. He had been co-director of Goldman Sachs IT division. And he was working as the CEO for a company called Bytech. And he wanted to talk to us about our mouth guard. And, long story short, my cousin did the negotiating. We sold the company to Bytech. Years later, I took the company back. We were in roads. And then about 8 or 9 months later, I get a phone call from a gentleman at his first buy. And the reason he did is because Delta Dentals all have these community outreach programs, and what they do is they'll give away the mouth guards in underprivileged areas. So he asked me if he could get pricing on 50,000 mouth guards, and I'm thinking, I think I'm getting punked here. So I said, look, I'm at a convention right now. Can I call you back when the convention's over? And he said, sure. And next day I get an email from him saying, I changed that to 100,000. And now I really think that this is maybe not legitimate. Right. But I did call him, and we ended up, he came to Florida because that's where we were manufacturing. And my cousin, one of the companies he owned, he had an office in Florida. And so he happened to be there. So we all met. And he said, we have an interim CEO who is probably going to be permanent. The board is going to be meeting. And when I left, he said, why don't you find out what the price is for 1 million mouth guards? And when I heard that, I looked at my cousin, he looked at me, and I'm thinking, something is really wrong here, But we talked a little more, and then he came up with, would you guys rather sell your company? I said, well, we're open to a discussion. So he asked my cousin to put together a proposal, and he put together a proposal. He gave them 3 choices, and 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from him. He says, I'm coming back to Florida, and so is our VP of Operations, who you've already met, our Vice President of Finance, and our CEO. And I called my cousin, and I said, look, they're not going to buy mouth guards. These other people, there's no reason for them to come. We met, and at one point, the CEO said, how much do you guys want for the company? And I gave him a figure, and I said to him, look, I just want you to understand that the numbers are not going to justify, the financials will not justify the numbers. And he said, why not? And I said, we've only had the company back 8 months, so we really haven't had an opportunity to build it. He said, okay, well, let me take your proposal. I got a board meeting in 2 weeks. Let me take it to them. So he left, and I said to my cousin, he's going to come back with a counteroffer. He called me 2 weeks later, and he said, look, I met with the board. They agreed to your number and working capital. And so what's happened is we've taken the material that was initially just an athletic mouth guard and blown it up. I mean, we're getting into, we have a tooth whitening kit where the trays are made from this material because it gives you a custom fit. We have as you mentioned. We have a FDA cleared TMJ bruxism appliance, night guard, snore reduction appliance. They're all made from this material. We have a sports
It's amazing. I
performance.
wanted to ask you. I'm sorry to interject, but I wanted
Yeah,
to ask
no,
you
no,
something because with these night guards, I've heard, and I'm sure the viewers are very interested, and the athletes out there are very interested about getting increased performance. Can you mention a little bit about what this night guard could do for an athlete's performance, and maybe tell some stories? Because I see you've been with
sure.
so many athletes.
Yeah. So there was a person that I knew from the company, the first company, Bytech, Dr. Dina Garner, who is head of research at the Citadel. I think she's a neurophysiologist. So anyway, she had 15 years of peer-reviewed research on mouthpieces and sports performance. So they bought her patent, and then she and I went about designing the product. The sports performance piece is different than the night guard in that, number one, it's designed differently. Number two, what it does is it doesn't move your lower jaw forward. It moves your tongue forward and down. And as a result, when you're exerting yourself, you get more oxygen. And when you get more oxygen, you get a reduction in respiratory rate, cortisol, lactic acid. So the first thing we did, we went to the CrossFit community, and we ended up doing a deal with a gentleman by the name of Rich Froning. Rich is a 4-time world CrossFit champion. And the interesting thing is that we've sold that product in almost 80 countries, and we haven't spent a penny in advertising outside the United States. Because basically, people in the CrossFit community, when they hear it's Rich Froning, they buy it. And so the CrossFit people, the fit on that is not a custom fit, because they like to, in between sets, they like to be able to take it out, pop it out. So what we did was we modified it to create another product where we added more of the material in the channels, and so that when it shrinks, it gives you a custom fit. And that one is called Endurance, and that is for runners, cyclists, track and field people. We have an arrangement with USA Triathlon, and that gives you, it does the same thing, but it gives you a nice fit. We recently, which we're rolling out, I think next week, a collaboration with Harrison Bader, who's the center fielder for the New York Yankees. Harrison was traded by the Cardinals to the Yankees last year, and in 86 games, he hit 5 home runs. 2 days before the playoffs, he got one of our mouthpieces. I try to convince him to use the Endurance, but he also likes the idea of not having it as a custom fit. Anyway, 2 days before the playoffs, he told me the minute he put it in his mouth, he felt relaxed. And he hit 5 home runs in 9 games. Wow. Yeah. And, he and I have talked about it. He's a really, really sharp young man. He understands the science behind it. And so we have that. And then because of our arranger, Rich Froning, we came out with another model, which is under his label. His team is called Mayhem. So now we have a Mayhem brand. And we're doing a lot of that. We're doing a lot of branding. As you noticed when we were at the HDA, we created an HDA brand.
The Hispanic Dental Association.
Yeah. We actually have a meeting Thursday night with Dr. Cordero and Lydia and Christine. to kind of map out strategy, because there's a big benefit to them in the way of number one, revenue to the HDA, and also part of our program is we give away an athletic mouth guard for every night guard that's sold, so that the offices can also use them. Well, HDA would use it. The parent organization would use it in underprivileged communities and distribute them.
Very nice.
You know, it's kind of like the Tom Shoes plan or Bombas socks, you know, that kind of stuff, where you get free good. They give away free goods. So yeah, so you know, it's interesting, and so I got involved with the sports, and as a result, I became friends with a lot of professional athletes. I have my friend Ron Freeman was a bronze and gold medalist in the Olympics. In '68, he set a world record in his leg of the 4x400. My other friend was Milt Campbell, who was always compared to Jim Thorpe as the greatest athlete in the United States ever. Unfortunately, Milt passed away about 2 or 3 years ago.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, and then we had a friend in New Jersey whose son was in an automobile accident and had a brain injury, and they were raising money for the organization, and they were doing something called a cut-a-thon, you know, where you have a place where people come in, they do a haircut for you, and then a percentage of that goes to the organization. So we did one of those, and at the end of the day, I asked her, I said, how much money did you make today? And it was like a little over $100. And I said, it's a waste of time. You know, if you really want to make money, you got to do something big. And so I had worked with Willis Reed, who played for the Knicks, if you remember, on a charity for children with cancer and blood disorders. And Willis became a vice president of the New Jersey Nets. And so I went up to the office and I asked him, I said, look, you know, I need an honorary chairperson for an organization. And long story short, we ended up doing something called Sports Night, which was an evening of interactive games, virtual reality games, not a sit-down dinner. I had friends of mine that played for the Giants and the Jets and the Olympic athletes. And one year we had Joe Piscopo was our MC. And
I'm curious to interject because I could talk with you forever, but unfortunately we're running out of time. How much did you raise that night?
Well, it's interesting. The first time we did it, you know, you pray that you break even. And we netted $25,000. The last one I did just before we moved to Florida, we raised $125,000.
Wow, very well done. Well, you know what, Doc, I think we're gonna have to have another show, and unfortunately, you know, we've run out of time. But you know, I can see there's other things I want to ask you. We're gonna have to have another show because not only have you done so much with dental and helping, but I can see you help communities. You know, you have tremendous amount of. You have a very simple but very powerful way that you get things done, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being part of this program.
No, thank you for the opportunity.
Show was sponsored by A Time for Truth Foundation Incorporated as a community service.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but Only God knows that you've given everything you've got. The world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet